Good morning, distinguished guests, Professor Vinod Kumar, Professor Lalit Kumar Avasthi, Dr. Yogender Malik, Professor Panikos Karyako, Professor Sri Krishnan, Dr. Rajesh Gupta, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of CIBioD, I welcome you all to the second session of International Summit ATMANIRBHAR BHARAT, India as a Manufacturing Hub for Global Health, organized by CIBioD. The topic for this second session is Digital Health Technology Vision 2025, How to Amplify Digital Interventions in a Post-COVID-19 Era. Past few months have changed the way we look at technology, which was introduced in households, irrespective of the socio-economic strata. Major trends that will continue to emerge are smartphones, big data, virtual reality, wearables, AI, blockchain, etc., which all help to ensure the best prevention and treatment, making healthcare accessible in minimal duration through means of telemedicine, video consultation, mobile health, etc. The key points for deliberation in this session are new models of technology-enabled care from vaccination certificate, infection monitoring, etc., remote monitoring, telemedicine and nursing robots, population health management, digital system supporting individual-centric health, consumerism and participative healthcare. We are extremely honored to have with us as presiding guest, Professor Vinod Kumar. Professor Vinod Kumar is Vice Chancellor of JP University of Information Technology, Himachal Pradesh, India. He was Deputy Director and Professor of Electrical Engineering at IIT Roorkee previously. Professor Vinod Kumar has earned many academic distinctions, including Khosla Research Awards of University of Roorkee, first IET RS Kanpur Medical Instrumentation Gold Medal, Railways Board Award for the Best Paper, K.S. Krishna Memorial Award, the Bridge Mohanlal Award, the Corps of Engineering Prize, Best Paper Certificates and Awards, Best Teacher Awardee at IIT Roorkee, and the list goes on. Professor Vinod Kumar has about 180 research papers to his credit in reputed journals. He has guided 28 PhDs, more than 150 MTech dissertations, and more than 150 BTech projects in the area of medical instrumentation and digital signal and image processing. Sir has held many positions in IIT Roorkee administration, including Dean Faculty Affairs, Head of Electrical Engineering Department, Continuing Education Center, QIP Center, Information Superhighway Center, and Audiovisual Center. He was also Associate Dean Academics, Chairperson of many committees, National Coordinator QIP, and member of several academic committees of other educational and technical institutions. He has taken more than 90 assignments as a consultant in diverse fields, with a rich experience of more than 41 years in teaching and research and technical education management. Sir is a life fellow of IETE and IEI, member IEI UK, and a senior member of IEEE USA. Thank you, sir, for sparing time and joining us for today's session. We are also fortunate to have with us as special guest, Dr. Yogender Malik, member NMC, Ethics and Medical Registration Board. Dr. Yogender is All India Secretary of the National Medicos Organization. He is an Associate Professor of Forensic Medicine and Toxicology at Bhagat Phool Singh Government Medical College for Women, Sonipat, Haryana, and holds MBBS and MD degrees. He was advisor to the Chief Minister Haryana from 2015 to 2020 and also advisor for Swachh Bharat Mission Haryana. Sex ratio of Haryana improved from 871 to 930 for the first time in history during his appointment. He has been awarded with 23rd Bau Rao Deoras Seva Samman for Seva activities in far-flung areas of Northeast, Jammu and Kashmir, and Uttarakhand. He has published various research papers, book chapters, served as editor for reputed journals, organized symposia in his very active career. Dr. Yoginder has been actively serving society with his various endeavors. Thank you, Dr. Yoginder, and welcome. As our keynote speaker, we are fortunate to have Professor Panikos Karyakou, Professor of Biomedical Engineering at University of London. Dr. Panikos Karyakou received a BEsc degree in Electrical Engineering from the University of Western Ontario, London, Canada, and an MSc and PhD degree in Medical Electronics and Physics from St. Bartholomew's Medical College, University of London, UK. He is currently serving as Professor of Biomedical Engineering and the Associate Dean for Research with the School of Mathematics, Computer Science and Engineering, City, University of London. Professor Karyakou has authored and co-authored over 250 publications and holds 6 patents with inventions in medical optical sensors. Thank you, sir, for sparing time and joining us. We are also fortunate to have as our second keynote speaker, Professor Sri Krishnan, Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Ryerson University, Toronto, Canada. Professor Krishnan is currently serving as a Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering and a co-director of the Institute for Biomedical Engineering, Science and Technology. He is a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Engineering. From 2007 to 2017, he was the Canada Research Chair in Biomedical Signal Analysis. Professor Sri Krishnan is a recipient of many awards, including the Outstanding Canadian Biomedical Engineer Award, Achievement in Innovation Award from Innovate Calgary, and Ryerson University's highest research award. Thank you, Professor Krishnan, for joining us at this ungodly hour. Now I would request, with the kind permission of our presiding guest, Professor Panikos Karyakou, to deliver his keynote address.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you. I had to, apologies. Good morning, everybody. Had to change computer. Let me try and share my presentation. Can you please confirm that you can see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides, sir. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And a special thanks to Vinod and our long-standing collaborations and friendship over the so many years. So today, I'm going to share with you a presentation that it tells you a little bit about optical sensors in healthcare. I'm going to split my presentation in two, and I'm going to wear two hats today. My first hat is primarily academic, and my other hat is primarily an entrepreneurship hat. So as a CEO of a company, and I hope I can provoke some thoughts of how we can collaborate with India in healthcare technologies, especially on wearable technologies. So I'm the director of the Biomedical Engineering Center here in London, and the focus of my team is to primarily develop novel, affordable medical technologies to look at various challenges, global challenges. And within my group, within my team, primarily what motivates us is to develop technologies for the early non-invasive screening of disease, is to also develop non-invasive technologies for blood and tissue biochemistry, and innovate new diagnostic and monitoring wearable technologies. The expertise of the team is primarily in sensors and instrumentation allied to healthcare or biomedical engineering. We are very heavy on wearable technologies, as I said earlier, primarily non-invasive and transcutaneous. We have a big section of the center on optical spectroscopy, and of course, a lot of biomedical signal processing using various techniques. We are a decent team with a very large national and international collaboration, with a number of academics in the team, a number of collaborators within the UK and abroad. And a lot of our research is funded by industry, medtech, healthcare industry. And within the team, we have a number of research fellows and a healthy number of PhD scholars. Within the lab, we primarily design, develop, and fabricate technology. A large number of the team comes from electrical, electronic engineering, allied to medical electronics and biomedical engineering. We develop customized sensor technologies depending on the application, whether it's clinical applications, whether it's in anesthesiology, in surgery, and any other field of medicine, but also wearable technologies for more consumer applications. We design and develop all the software platforms that we will provide to the clinicians or to the wearable devices in-house. And also we have specialized laboratories to perform in vivo work, which is on volunteers or on patients within our labs. Of course, as you probably all know, you can have the most wonderful technology acquiring fantastic signals, but it's how much you squeeze the signals using advanced signal processing techniques, whether it's time domain, frequency domain, or any other advanced signal processing. And over the last 5 years, and this is something that is growing exponentially, is the introduction of machine learning and AI for biosignals, is how we can extract information from physiological signals with using feature extractions in order to relate those signals into various pathophysiological phenomena. Of course, within our lab, being a very optical group, we do a lot of simulations as well to understand the behavior of light or photons when they interact with tissue, whether it's transcutaneous tissue or whether it's other indwelling organs or tissues. I'm going to give you a few examples of some of the work we do on populations. We do a lot of work with pediatrics and neonates, especially babies that they're born septicemic or babies they're born with hypoxic encephalitis. And we develop wearable technologies or non-invasive technologies in order to interrogate the brain to see if the brain is ischemic or is hypoxic. This is something that is challenged a lot of neonatal intensive care units of babies, where obviously if you want to see the perfusion of the brain, the best way is to do an MRI. You can appreciate you can't MRI children on a continuous basis, and therefore we develop a very small, very affordable optical sensor operating at 3 wavelengths for those that are more techie on the group, on infrared, red, and green. And we are interrogating the fontanelle of the baby. So this is the soft part of the brain of the skull before it's fused, which provides a very nice optical window for us to enter into the brain optically and look if this baby's brain is oxygenated adequately. Another area that we develop a lot of sensor technologies and wearable or transcutaneous is to be able to monitor holistically the perfusion of blood and tissue. So if somebody is hypothermic, is hypovolemic, is vasoconstrictive, or there is an onset of infection, we develop reflectance optical technologies based on both near-infrared spectroscopy and photoplethysmography, and we can measure continuously and non-invasive various parameters such as oxy, deoxy, hemoglobin, tissue oxygenation, total hemoglobin, of course, heart rate, blood oxygen saturation, and perfusion index, all in one device, which is transcutaneous. Our applications expand also outside the area of perfusion and oxygenation. We just developed now a new wearable device to be able to measure hydration of skin. So this could be used both in clinical applications, especially on babies, on fluids, but also we can be used for more commercial applications or consumer applications where there is a direct interest of people understanding whether they're hydrated or not, especially in sports applications. Recently, we have developed a collaboration with an industry in developing the first smart ear wearable device. So this device, it looks exactly like a headphone device. It can go behind the ear or in any other embodiment or configuration. Within the device, we embed electronics and optics. So we have optical components on the periphery of the device embedded within the bore of the device. We also encapsulated an infrared pyroelectric sensor. So continuously now we can measure the core temperature of the body, the heart rate, the breath rate, oxygen saturation, and perfusion index. And this again, we are using both in clinical applications, especially on patients that they have low peripheral perfusion. These are very sick patients, so their fingers, all their toes, they are constricted, they are vasoconstricted, and they can't get enough signals to measure those parameters. But also we're using them in sports, and we have worked with the British Olympic team where they wanted something in the ear to monitor their performance while they're exercising. More clinically, just to give you a flavor, we have more hardcore clinical applications, and this is a project in collaboration with Medtronic in the US. We're developing the first indwelling sensor for colorectal cancer. These are for patients that they are doing a resection of the colon following cancer, where the surgeons, they would like to see that the colon following resection it is perfused adequately before they close the operation in the abdomen. So we have developed an indwelling sensor. The sensor, you can see here the finalization of the sensor in a sterilizable pack. The sensor goes into the colon and it goes across the anastomosis where the colorectal surgeons will make the cut, and it will measure the viability of the tissue bilaterally across the anastomosis in order to tell them that following the resection of the cancerous part, the colon or this part of the colon is still perfused and the tissue is still healthy. So for this, we are combining both techniques, near-infrared spectroscopy and also photoplethysmography. So we're looking at tissue perfusion, which is more regional, oxy and deoxyhemoglobin of the tissue around the anastomosis, but also we're looking at global perfusion, which is oxygen saturation across the area. We are currently in clinical trials in a large group of colorectal patients, and the results, they're very good. We have just finished some results before COVID-19 in the US, and now we continue the study in the UK. Another big area that is of interest internationally, and we work both with the UK and the US, both in clinical and military applications, is to be able to measure intracranial pressure following traumatic brain injury. This is a major challenge across the world. If somebody has an accident, whether it's through a car accident or whether it's in the field, whether it's in sports, and you had a big blow on the head or a concussion, these patients, once they go in the hospital, they go into the neurocritical care units. And one thing the surgeons, they need to assess is whether the intracranial pressure, it is high. And if it's high, it can lead to hematomas and bleeding in the brain. And it's very difficult to assess the intracranial pressure, the pressure within the skull. The current state of the art, which is an extremely invasive procedure, is to drill a hole into the skull and insert a pressure transducer, otherwise known as an intracranial bolt. And this is a child where they put the bolt into the brain and they monitor their intracranial pressure. You can appreciate the invasiveness of the procedure and the manifestations of this invasive procedure it can have. So it can lead to a lot of infection and a lot of trauma. So the vision here, a very optimistic vision, is to develop a completely non-invasive sensor that you can put it on your forehead, and it can interrogate the brain, and it can actually tell you what is the pressure within the brain of these patients. So we want to replace this most invasive monitoring in clinical practice. We have designed and developed a completely wearable device, optically based. It is a plug and play sensor. You can peel it and stick it on the forehead. And this is demonstrated on one of our volunteers in the lab. And we have developed all the instrumentation and the data acquisition for clinical trials. Following regulatory approvals, we have taken the device into clinical trials in a neurotrauma unit. On the right, this is a patient that you can see the patient has an intracranial bolt into their brain. And on the forehead, we apply our non-invasive optical sensor for looking at intracranial pressure. This is in collaboration with the Royal London Hospital, which is the biggest neurocritical care hospital in the UK. Unfortunately, we have also affected by COVID-19, so the clinical trials have ceased for a period between March and August, and we are back now in intensive care continuing with patients. It is amazing, really, this is for the first time to see such encouraging results where an optical sensor interrogating the brain and using machine learning techniques to do feature extractions from the optical signals can tell us exactly the intracranial pressure. I know this is a small sample of patients, but you can see the correlation and the root mean square error of the linear regression models we're using. We're talking almost 2 millimeters of mercury accuracy of this device in its first pilot study, which for neurocritical surgeons, it's godsend really. So very good results. And now we're moving into the second stage of the project, which is the commercialization of the device. Finally, of course, like many other groups around the globe, we are intensely working in blood glucose sensing. Diabetes is almost like a pandemic where there is a need, an interest, and an appetite by both research and commercial institutions to develop completely non-invasive and calibration-free sensors to continuously monitor the glucose level in patients. And there have been many attempts over the last 30 years and is still ongoing. This is a project that we have not published anything because of intellectual property. The only thing I can share with you is currently we are on first in vivo studies on a completely non-invasive optical device using spectroscopy to be able to interrogate glucose continuously transcutaneously. This is something new, and a lot of people, they're unfamiliar with the employment of technologies in mental health. I mean, mental health around the globe is a challenge, it's an issue, and there is very little technology in mental health. There is a lot of pharmacological management of mental health, a lot of psychological and psychiatric management of mental health, but we have not seen commercial devices, technologies, to be able to assess stress, depression, and any other more severe mental health issues. So we have been challenged to take this project on, funded by the NHS in the UK, the government is public funding, to look at technologies for mental health. We have developed the first sensor combining optical spectroscopy and bioimpedance spectroscopy, looking at bipolar disorder. These are patients that they swing between manic and depressive states. And we have developed a lithium sensor. Lithium is the primary gold standard medication that these patients take. And if you don't take enough lithium, you will swing between manic and depressive states. If you take too much lithium, lithium is toxic and it can impact your kidneys and it could lead to toxicity. We have finished the first clinical trials on a point of care device, and now we're looking at a larger study. We were very motivated by this device, and now we have expanded the project by developing a wearable interstitial fluid wearable device. So this is minimally invasive. We're interrogating very shallow in the tissue with a biosensor coded to be sensitive to, well, at the moment we're looking at 5-6 biomarkers, which are the main biomarkers of mental health or stress, primarily cortisol, serotonin, lithium, oxytocin, dopamine, and adrenaline, where actually the tip of the wearable sensor, it is a biosensor. It is sensitive to any of the biomarkers. It penetrates just very lightly into your interstitial space, and then we can interrogate continuously the interstitial fluid for any of those biomarkers. And we are currently doing in vitro work on this technology. Another research area that is, again, I'm picking up these global challenges, is sepsis. For those that are in the broad field of medicine or clinical practice, septic shock, hemodynamic shock, the mortality is very high. These patients, they have operations, they go into intensive care, and then following intensive care, they develop infection and sepsis. And if they go into a septic shock, the mortality is almost inevitable. So currently, there are many biomarkers for sepsis, but clinicians are looking for a solution that they can look at the onset of sepsis fast enough, quickly. So two of the biomarkers that we've been looking is partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of CO2. And following many consultations with intensivists and anesthesiologists and sepsis experts, basically the first part of the body that is responsible to trigger a septic shock, it is the bowel. It's hypoperfusion or ischemia of the bowel. Of course, we cannot access the bowel under the abdomen non-invasively. So we went into the lower esophagus, and the circulation of the lower esophagus is a proxy to the splanchnic circulation. So we developed a fiber optic sensor using fluorescence techniques. The fiber optic sensor goes through the mouth at the lower esophagus, and it continuously monitors both PO2 and PCO2. This is the only and first optical sensor that is coded with a cocktail that we manufacture that actually can be responsive both to partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of carbon dioxide in one sensor. And again, the sensor is being manufactured, and now you can see the sensor here. So this is the tip of the fiber optic sensor. This is the connection to the optical platform. It is completely sterilizable, so the clinicians can just peel this, take it out, and put it down the patient through the mouth in the lower part of the esophagus. And it will continually, we've done about 22 post-cardiac surgery patients so far. And we can see we have excellent results on PCO2. We still have some work to do on partial pressure on O2. We still have some work to do on CO2. So again, this could give a rapid and continuous monitoring of those two biomarkers. Otherwise, you have to do a blood gas analysis to be able to measure them continuously, which is invasive, and you can't do samples of blood continuously invasively. So it could be another solution to be able to trigger or inform the onset of sepsis on patients in intensive care. The last project before I change my hat is, of course, we are one of the 10 groups around the world that is working on a continuous non-invasive cuffless blood pressure estimation. This is a project that we do with Samsung in Korea. We're looking at developing a wearable sensor, primarily on the wrist, where it can continuously measure blood pressure accurately, calibration free, and calibration free, this is underlined and in bold, where you can see your systolic and diastolic pressure, and it could be used as an ambulatory device in patients, especially that they suffer for hypertension, which of course it can lead to heart problems and stroke. So this is a very busy space internationally, both commercially. I know probably most of the main manufacturers like Apple, Google, and Samsung, they're working on this, and many others. And there is a lot of publication in the last 5 years, almost exponential growth in people trying to develop a completely non-invasive blood pressure wearable device. And obviously our technique is based on PBG technologies and machine learning. Now I'm going to switch hats, and I'm going to wear my CEO hat. I'm a CEO of a company primarily on wearables. The company is called Plethyalytics. So it's Pleth for plethysmography and AI for artificial intelligence and data analytics. And I have a proposal for India, and this is something that I'm working for some time. We came to India a couple of times, and we've done some horizon scanning with both government and hospitals, primarily Maharashtra. And the request and the need is to develop a smart wearable technology that it will be able to detect the onset of infection in babies and children and monitor their vital signs remotely in rural areas or in any other part of India. So if you want to see the landscape internationally, obviously there is a very high mortality in children under 5, and primarily the global mortality of neonates is around 2.6 million children in their first month every year. So this is a staggeringly large number. And the mortality of children under 5 is 5.6 million deaths per year. So it's a very high mortality, and the 98% of the deaths are from developing countries. And the major cause is infection that is go unnoticed, and then by the time it's been picked up, these children obviously go into a more severe septicemia or infection disease, and it is irreversible. There are many barriers to obviously in developing countries. Some of them is the lack of infrastructure, is the limited space in neonatal and pediatric wards, is the limited availability of professionals out there in the community to be able to pick out those babies and children. Also, there is perhaps some lack of knowledge. Some parents, they can pick it up quickly by using intuition of some basic tools like a thermometer. It can be expensive as well. And WHO, which we have worked with them for many years, they have a target within their mission to reduce neonatal mortality by 2030 to 12 deaths per 1,000 live births. So more than 60% of the child deaths can be avoidable with a low-cost measure. So can we design an affordable, easy to interpret wearable technology that we can save children's lives? For us, because we've been in this business, because of our research background, the company has been formed by a team of researchers that have been with me for decades, is to develop a wearable technology drawing from our research background and our expertise and track record in sensors. So we want to bring together a sensor that comprises many biomarkers together, 5 in total. We want to introduce smart analytics, artificial intelligence within the sensor, join the sensor technology into a mobile app. The mobile app can be different for parents and healthcare providers. So the biomarkers that we chose following clinical advice, of course, is temperature, is respiration, heart rate, oxygenation of the babies, and motion tracking as well. And the combination of those can give you a holistic picture of the well-being of the baby. So we want to work with people in India, whether it's industry or healthcare providers or even institutions, to develop this unique and affordable technology in a partnership, and launch this within a couple of years. It will be actually the first wearable. And for those that are interested in why temperature, why respiration, I mean, for us, it could be obvious. For some people, they want to see the motivation. Of course, temperature, you can detect if the baby is the onset of fever or hypothermia. On respiration, you can look at sleep apnea and asthma. Of course, if you have the heart rate of the babies, you can look at bradycardia, tachycardia, and you can use pulse rate variability in order to associate the heart rate with infection. Oxygenation, of course, if you know they're hypoxic, they can lead to congenital heart disease or pneumonia. Sleep monitoring of babies then is very useful on the well-being of the baby. Of course, the position of the baby, which in the literature is related to cot death and other sudden death syndrome. So for us, we call this device Nixie. For those that are interested, Nixie is the Latin, the Roman goddess of childbirth. It's not just an infection monitor, but we want to aim to reduce the parental anxiety of the baby's well-being. So the technology will be obviously linked to an app platform. It will allow real-time data tracking. You will have alerts. It can be a centralized database. We can power this with artificial intelligence and telehealth. So this is a typical, platform that either parents or healthcare providers can use, and it can be customized. The parents might not need to see all the detail. The parents could easily see a traffic light system, a green and amber and red, but healthcare providers can see more on the baby. And when we talk to people in India, the adaptation for India, we can have this device. It can be given to parents. I know in India, parents receive almost like a package. Mothers, they receive a package, I think it's by the government, comprising a few things like cord, nappies, etc. This could be obviously given to the parents, and then the parents will work very closely with the ASHA workers that they look after a lot of children in a lot of parts of India. They are overwhelmed with obviously populations of children. They can't be there for them all the time. So ASHA workers can have access in real time of the well-being of the children they're looking after. And therefore, when they see a trigger, then they can visit and they can provide the consultation to the family, to the parents, or to the village where they're looking after. And of course, then they can trigger the ASHA workers to recommend early hospital admission and treatment of the babies based on the information, the dynamic information that they will receive in real time. So I have an open invitation for anybody who is interested in this frugal technology. It has to be low cost, simple to use, to partner with us. So the invitation is open. So for that, I thank you very much, and please feel free to contact me in either of my emails. I'm a very regular visitor to India, excluding COVID, and I have a lot of affection and affiliation with a lot of Indian universities, IIT Roorkee, IIT Kharagpur, and AIIMS. So I would love to work with you on this project. Thank you so much for your time. I'll be very happy to answer any questions or curiosities if you have.
Thank you, Professor Panikos, for throwing light on the latest devices, AI and ML technologies for biomedical signal analysis, sensor technologies for non-invasive monitoring of tissues, mental health, sepsis, etc. Your proposal for India to use technology to combat high mortality for neonates is sure to generate a lot of interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would now like to invite Professor Sri Krishnan to deliver his keynote address.
Thank you very much. Can I get the permission to share my screen, please? Yeah.
Yes, sir. You already have the privilege, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you again for the very kind introduction, and also great thanks to my collaborator, Dr. Professor Vinod Kumar, for the kind invitation. I wish I was in Chandigarh, but unfortunately it couldn't happen. My favorite IPL team was CSK until this year, where Kings 11 became my favorite team. Okay, so I wish we could watch IPL next time live in India. So I'm going to continue on the presentation of Professor Panikos, because a lot of things he said actually resonates very well with the type of work we are doing here at Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada. So the topic is broadly wearables and connected healthcare. So this is a virtual tour of Toronto for people who haven't been to the city. It's the largest city in Canada with a population of 6 million in the greater Toronto area. So that's Lake Ontario that you see, which essentially flows into Niagara Falls. We have a tall building called CN Tower, and Ryerson University, the university I work, is right in the downtown. It's very close to the CN Tower here. So we are a city university, just like the previous speaker is from City University, London. So we do take pride in innovation and impact. So Ryerson used to be a polytechnic 25 years ago, then it morphed into a full-fledged academic university. So we take pride in innovation impact. So typically in an academic context, we have students and the faculty, they do a blue sky research, then they come with interesting ideas and they try to innovate and do the tech transfer. At Ryerson, we have taken a very different approach. We call it zones. So the ideas start from day one when the student enters the program, either it's an undergraduate or a graduate student. The idea is that we want the students to take risk and we want them to fail and learn. So it's part of the learning process, this entrepreneurship. So one of the concepts we called is zones, where we have an interdisciplinary approach, a sandbox approach in dealing with innovation. There are many such zones at Ryerson. We have 14 zones, but I like to point out one key one called the DMZ, or Digital Media Zone, where close to 350 startups have been created in the past 8 years. And this was ranked as the #1 institutional-based incubator by UBI. And in fact, as I said, there are 14 other startups like DMZ focusing on different areas. So what would relate to the biomedical engineering is this institute called IBEST, Institute for Biomedical Engineering, Science and Technology. So in this unit, we collaborate with a neighboring hospital called St. Michael's Hospital, where the clinicians and the engineers coexist. Okay, so we have occupied a floor in the hospital where medical physicists and engineers have come together. And when you see this particular slide, it represents the hospital on the left side and the research institute on the right side. There is a symbolic bridge that connects. So whatever we do as engineers is patient-centric. The design problem comes from the doctors and the hospitals, and we try to give a solution. So this is like, instead of having the hammer and looking for the nail, we have the nail and we basically put the hammer on it, okay? So this is very, very interesting for us because we are solving real world problems there. So in terms of the background that I want to bring in, Canada is a very small country, nothing compares to India, but cancer is the leading cause of death, followed by heart attack and stroke and so forth. So that's the death scenario in Canada and other parts of the world. But on the other hand, if you look into the life expectancy map, for example, in India, it's in close to mid-70s. In some countries where it's marked by blue, it's in low 80s. The good news is that people are living longer. Great, okay? So people on an average are living 1 year longer for every 5 years. So right now, for example, the average life expectancy in Canada is 81, but in 5 years down the line, it would be 82 and so forth. So that's a great news. Now, the problem comes is that in a situation like here, where the healthcare is funded by the government, currently for every dollar, 40 cents goes into healthcare. But this situation is going to reverse in 10 years. Yes, I know we are talking about 2025 vision, but in 2030, the situation would reverse, where for healthcare, around 60 cents per dollar is needed. Where does it go? It essentially goes in taking care of elderly people. So before the COVID project hit, the main aspect of our work was remote health monitoring for geriatric population, long-term care facilities. Okay. So in terms of the outline that I want to talk, briefly touch upon connected healthcare, and I will quickly go through 3 variables that we are working on: vitoscope, covidoscope, and affectoscope. In the connected healthcare situation, this is a conference on telemedicine, wearables, and AI. There are a lot of wearables out there, and these are some very classical examples of established wearables like Thalmic Labs Maya control for EMG, the EEG wearable from Emotive, Interexon's Muse, and actually some of them have come from innovations and inventions right nearby to us from Toronto and Waterloo. So there are many such wearables available out there, and it basically leads to a connected human. In addition to these electronic wearables, we can also have textile as another wearable device, and a lot of industry is looking into textile-based monitoring also. We did a survey which was published in the article where our previous speaker is editor-in-chief, Biomedical Signal Processing and Control, where we scanned the wearable landscape and we figured out there are at least 400 recognized wearables out there. Most of the wearables tend to be in the fitness world. That's what they do first before they go into the healthcare sector. And also, interestingly, it's mostly focused on the head area. The reason could be because of gaming industry and brain-computer interactions. Okay, so this is kind of the landscape of wearables 3 years ago, and I think currently there are 600 plus wearables, including some wearables which have been cleared by FDA and used in regular context. So virtual healthcare is really going to be benefited from all this aspect of connectivity, mobility. We are talking about 5G communications and privacy and security. And it will allow us to move from a reactive healthcare model to a proactive model. So prevention is better than cure, okay? So this is very important, especially if you want to bring down the healthcare costs of what we are encountering currently. It also is enabled by some standardization efforts, like IEEE, for example, is working on some standardization efforts in terms of how do we communicate in an IoT, Internet of Things context. And all those developments are happening for even for standardization of data and things like that. So in terms of what we do, the group that I lead is the Signal Analysis Research Group. And the very first thing I want to briefly touch upon is Vitascope. Continuing on the previous speaker's talk, yes, 10 million babies are born at birth. The problem is that most babies don't breathe, or they need to be given CPR, resuscitation. So that particular minute is called the golden minute. And if you don't save the baby during that time, the baby will be lost, unfortunately. Okay. So what's needed here? At that 1 minute, what needs to be measured is the heart rate. And you will be surprised. This problem, as I said, came from the doctors in the hospital. They came to us, and this doctor works in an intensive care unit. And they said they are not able to detect the heart rate properly when the baby is born for many reasons. And even in the current COVID context, some people, as could imagine, the delivery is happening at home. So this is an example of a midwife who's delivering the baby and giving the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to bring the baby back to life. Unfortunately, the baby survived. But the issue is that she had no clue of what would the heart rate be at that point. Okay? So there is a demand there. It was coming out of a pediatric collaboration in providing a suitable wearable for this kind of application. So there are available technologies. Currently, people use stethoscope, pulse oximetry, and ECG. They all have their pros and cons. For example, ECG is the gold standard, but you need to put the electrodes on the baby's skin, which is very fragile and very delicate. So the solution we have and what we are developing is called Vitascope, because everybody has a stethoscope with us. It's a universal symbol. The Vitascope acts as a wearable to any stethoscope. So basically attached to any existing stethoscope. And what it does, it displays the heart rate. It visibly displays the heart rate instantaneously and accurately. And we don't have to put any ECG electrodes here. It's purely based on dry ECG electrodes. And what's happening here is that the pediatric collaborator is putting the stethoscope on the baby's chest here. And right now, they could see the heart rate right on that display there. This is very important. Currently, what they do is they do the tapping, they count the heartbeat, and it's very hard to communicate to the caregiving team around it. But this number, when it's displayed, the entire, including the pediatric doctor and also the nurses, can see what's the heart rate that's happening. And if needed, they can do the CPR, the resuscitation of it. So it's so important in saving babies at that point. So we are in the preclinical stage of this development. We are going through the validation phase with the local hospitals, as I indicated. And here we also have the opportunity, because it's known, once you have an ECG, we can also derive the respiration out of it through what's called the EDR, ECG-derived respiration. So we are also working on getting the respiratory information from them. So what would be the comparators? So if you see here, this is a Vitascope. It's instantaneous because right now, when you put on the chest, it displays the reading instantaneously. Compared to either a pulse oximeter or an ECG, it's accurate, it's accessible. Most importantly, it's baby friendly. Okay, you don't have to put any gel. You don't have to mount your electrodes. It's basically putting a dry ECG electrode on the baby's skin. So this also has a COVID thing, because a lot of births have increased, home births with COVID, and it could be used for telemedicine and remote monitoring, just like any other things that we have seen with other wearable applications. So that's about the Vitascope. Now, when we were doing this project for the past 2 years, when COVID hit in March 2020, we decided what we can do from an engineering perspective. We cannot develop vaccine. Is there something we can do to innovate here? So that led to the idea of CIBioD. So CIBioD is simply based on existing microphones. There's no fancy instrumentation. Existing microphones, either this conversation we are having right now or your smartphone. So this is an example of a data that we collected from my own smartphone. Throat clearing, cough, sound, and inhalation, exhalation. All those coming from microphone. No need to add any additional modality here. So there is a lot of things we can do with speech and sound. This is a range of things that we could do for risk assessment, diagnosis, and monitoring. For example, even you can get the mental health status, the lung sounds, and there is a nice summary that is in the preprint that's quoted there from Professor Schuler. They put this nice summary of different tasks that are possible, and also during non-speech, like other types of sound, for example, cough. Okay? So we picked the cough from there because at that point, cough was one of the dominant symptoms of COVID. So that led to developing CIBiOD. What we did is that we morphed the Vitascope by including a microphone and started recording the cough signals. So this is an example of the process it goes through for cough, and it's known through the machine learning framework. We can pick up 4 broad categories of cough: a deep lung infection, a COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, asthma cough, and throat infection cough. So if you see here, basically all we did is that we took this time domain signal, mapped into 2-dimensional plot through the process called spectrogram, or a time frequency representation, and we used machine learning to pick up very characteristics information. This is not based on any deep learning approaches because we are not using any cloud analytics. It's done at the device level. So when it's done at the device level, it's more like an edge artificial intelligence, and we found very specific biomarkers that corresponds to both normal and abnormal sounds just acquired through microphone data. And for example, I can play some sounds here and to you. So that's the example of a deep lung infection. So this is very important now because we are, for example, in Canada, we are also having the regular flu season. So the idea is to differentiate between a COVID cough versus a regular cough. So the machine learning is able to pick up some biomarkers, and we are getting some very interesting results, to the extent that even other research groups in the United States and UK have found out that the asymptomatic cough is very representative, and it could be used for basically stratifying the risk of it. Okay, may not be diagnostics, but is the patient improving by staying at home, whether he or she needs ICU or medical attention. Okay. And these are the distinct markers we found by using simple machine learning algorithms, by using nice feature engineering. The red and the blue differentiates the different coughs that you're seeing there. So we have integrated this into an app if you want, and it provides all the vital signs needed for COVID. The heart rate, it's known the heart rate increases in a COVID subject. The temperature is also high, respiratory rate, and also the cough score. So that's the innovation here, is that we provided a cough score which is normalized between 0 to 100, and that gives an idea the severity of the cough. And typically in a COVID, it tends to be a dry cough. Okay. So that's the CIBiOD. Now the third one is affectoscope. I will quickly go through the affectoscope. A third concept is that it's known, again, as Dr. Panis, the previous speaker, mentioned, mental health has become an issue in COVID. So how do we do a telepsychotherapy or telepsychiatry? And in this case, we are picking up vital physiological signals. In addition to your ECG, heart rate variability, we are also picking up galvanic skin response and other things. And one difference is that we are doing a long-term HRV monitoring in determining the stress level. In addition, we are also using microphone data. Long-term HRV is one aspect of it. And we are also using a microphone data. So this is what we got from HRV. It clearly shows the difference between a stressed on the left side and the one normal subject on the right side. And I also wanted to point out that we are also using the microphone speech data in doing the analysis here. So if you see here, this is typically the 6 emotional states defined by the psychologists. And they are facial expressions. But in terms of speech, or in terms of acoustic signal, so that's kind of an anger speech. So obviously this has happened. So what's the difference here is that by using the same acoustical mapping, we can do a quantification of the emotional state rather than just having a very subjective opinion. So we are expanding this thing. In addition to doing facial analysis, we are adding audio and other physiological signals as a modality in the affectoscope project that we are working on. So we got some, again, some interesting results. If you see into these maps are very representative, and you can use a simple explainable machine learning to pick up the characteristics of those. So with this one, I think the time is up. So I would like to thank you all for the attention, basically covering the 3 scopes. No additional equipment is needed. All we need is microphone in most cases. In some cases, we need a dry ECG electrode. Thank you again.
Thank you, Professor Sri Krishnan, for your enlightening talk and for drawing attention to the numerous applications of virtual healthcare, including using various wearable technologies, and for discussing innovations like Vitascope, Covidascope, and Effectoscope. I am sure it will inspire more of our audience to work in these domains and arrive at some practical solutions for society. Now, I would like to invite our chief guest, Dr. Yoginder Malik, to say a couple of lines on the theme, please. Dr. Yoginder Malik.
Screen share.
Sir, I request you to unmute yourself, please.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, a very good afternoon to one and all. And thanks for inviting me to this a very innovative international summit on Atmanirbhar Bharat. Atmanirbhar Bharat is no more a dream for Indians and the Prime Minister of country. It's a pledge. And this is a right step forward. Because if I share one of my experience, sometimes back I read a book by Mikhail Kako. It was Future of Physics. And it told a little bit about what the future of health and medical education will look like. But that was a kind of fairy tales for us when I read that. But now, after attending this keynote address by Professor Paniko and Sri Krishnanji, I am of the opinion that we are moving towards that fairy tale world, which we basically understood few years back that it's going to happen. Secondly, I am thankful to the ICMR Center for Innovation and Biodesign, PGMR Chandigarh, especially Dr. Virender Gargji, who has invited me for this. And after listening to this keynote address, I'm really thankful because as a doctor, many things are even new to me. This post-COVID era, even this COVID era, this has forced us, this was unexpected, but this has forced us to think innovatively. And this has expedited many things like use of technology in healthcare sector. To give you an example, some examples, like telemedicine guidelines, they were issued by Board of Governors during this COVID pandemic in India. And secondly, our health policy, which was released a few years back, it also focused on the use of technology in health and medical education. India has specifically launched this digital health mission, we all know. And this newly formed National Medical Commission is also focusing on use of technology in medical education. What I think is, I'll say only 3-4 sentences, like what we should do as a follow-up of this summit is this field is new for many, and we need to spread awareness about its use and benefits, as people may have some suspicion about the side effects of the technology. This summit is a right, I'll say, a step in the right direction. And secondly, I'll request that the next step should be that we should need to train more manpower for these new kind of fields in the field of medical instrumentation and use of technology in health. And also we need to increase collaboration and coordination of technology and medical and health institutes. I was very happy when I saw that breeze in Dr. Sri Krishnan presentation, that we have in a single, as a single body, technical people and health people, they are working together. In India, we need to have more such collaborations between the technical people and the medical fraternity, I think. And my last submission is that we have to have a group where we can put all these things into the medical education system, so that our wards, when they are entering into the MBBS or BDS or in some other field, they got to know about what we can achieve and what is going to be the future of the health industry and the health of this country. So in the end, I again thank all of you, and I'm really thankful to the keynote speakers, both of them. I'm going back with many added knowledge and many ideas, which obviously I'll be sharing on mail with them. I thank again the organizers of this summit for inviting me to as a guest in this summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Yogender, for your very insightful inputs. Ladies and gentlemen, CIBioD had constituted an award for promotion of innovation in the medical technologies category. I seek the kind permission of our presiding expert, Dr. Vinod Kumar, to announce the CIBioD MedTech Innovation Promotion Award. I think Dr. Vinod Kumar, do I have your permission to announce the proud award?
Oh, sure. It's my pleasure to give consent to confer award to Professor Lalit Kumar Avasthi, Director NIT. He is a very deserving person, very learned person, very hardworking, and very much into research and innovation promotion. So it's always a pleasure to meet such people and to confer awards to such people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So our distinguished jury, after deliberation, has decided to confer the award on the very dynamic Professor Lalit Kumar Avasthi ji. I now invite Dr. Rajesh Gupta from PGIMER to please introduce our awardee. Dr. Rajesh Gupta.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Lalit Kumar Avasthi, who's Director of the National Institute of Technology, Jalandhar, and who has been very aptly selected for this prestigious award. Professor Lalit Kumar is an alumnus of IIT Delhi and IIT Roorkee. He has been professor in computer science and engineering, NIT Hamirpur. He has worked as head of CSC department and computer center and dean, students and alumni. He's published more than 100 research papers, and his research areas include the mobile computing, sensor networks, P2P networks, and consultancy in related areas. My congratulations to Professor Lalit Kumar Avasthi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Professor Lalit Avasthi, I now invite you to briefly engage with the audience, sir.
Good noon to everyone and greetings from NIT Jalandhar. I thank especially the Center for Innovation and Biodesign and all the guests, Honorable Shri Vinod Kumar ji, who have been Deputy Director at IIT Roorkee when I was in my research PhD, and Dr. Yogender ji, Dr. Rajesh, Dr. Virendra Garg ji, and both the keynote speakers. There has been very, very precisely and very nicely they have put forward what is required if India has to become Atmanirbhar. So I definitely feel proud that our organization, NIT Jalandhar, in 1 year time have filed more than 30 designs and patents this year, and many of them have been related to COVID. And one robot has been developed by NIT Jalandhar, which is now transferred. There's many such technologies. My only submission will be that in India, if we want to change, we need to look into the possibility of having multidisciplinary approach. Here, as we know, our system used to be very rigid, that we have technology universities like IITs and NITs, and then we have the the medical universities like PGIMER, the PG, this Chandigarh institutions, AIMS, and all that. So we need to come together. I think the medical people, they need to look into what are the problems. There's so many problems has been shared by our experts, Professor Krishnan and Professor Penikos. I know these problems actually which have been, they are developing the solutions also for that. In India also, we probably can have the medical people defining the problems, giving the problem statement to the technical institutions, and we need to have collaboration. As has been, the initiative is very novel. Dr. Virendra Garg, he approached us, and we are also part of this Center for Innovation and Biodesign. I would like that all the problems which are being faced, they need to be shared, and we can come together like university at Baghnaghat, the NIT Jalandhar people, and the medical people. They can come together, and we can have innovations and maybe related to any of the diseases as has been given. And I think I'm not very much into the core of the medical research, but what we face a problem in Indian system is the database of various diseases related to how we can have initial symptoms and things like that. So if those symptoms are shared with the technocrats, probably we can look into of devising some devices which can catch on these problems at an early stage, maybe cancer and all things like that. So in this world, I thank the Center for Innovation and Biodesign. I thank the jury. I thank Professor Vinod Kumarji. I thank Dr. Yogendra Malik and the keynote speakers for this session. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you, Professor Awasthi. I would now request Professor Vinod Kumar to deliver the presidential remarks.
Very good noon to all my participants who have joined this session number 2, and the experts from India. Good morning to Professor Penikos. It must be morning in England, and good late evening to my very close friend Professor Krishnan, where it must be probably midnight, more than 1 p.m. And my friends present here, Dr. Yogendra Malik, Dr. Rajesh Gupta ji, good morning, good noon to all of you. As we had a very two interesting talk, one by Professor Penikos, that is on optical sensors in healthcare. He has discussed in detail non-invasive techniques for screening of diseases, and he has discussed good number of optical sensors and wearable sensors which are non-invasive in nature. Various sensors for measurement of blood glucose sensor, sepsis sensor in mental health, intracranial pressure, ear sensors for the measurement of core temperature, heart rate, oxygen concentration, breath rate, etc. And another one which is under development, that is cuffless and calibration free blood pressure estimation is under development. Professor Panicos has also discussed the use of software for the analysis of optical biosignals for using machine learning and AI. The talk itself meets the requirement of the theme very much. I am very thankful to Professor Panicos for accepting our invitation in the first go. I am really very thankful to him. The second talk was by Professor Shri Krishnan. Shri Krishnan also discussed very much the wearable and non-invasive type of sensors and the technologies for providing a framework for continuous monitoring of vital health parameters. He has also discussed virtual healthcare model, that is from reactive model to proactive model. His all research work is in collaboration with a medical school, and he has discussed in detail 3 devices with the app on a mobile phone. These devices are Vitascope to display heart rate, etc., Covidoscope, and Affectoscope. All the 3 devices are very useful for monitoring the vital parameter of the neonatals, for the vital parameters of human beings, even during and after COVID-19. The talk has also highlighted various signal processing and machine learning tools for developing PC-based or mobile-based app. I am very thankful to Professor Krishnan for agreeing to deliver such an interesting talk. Professor Panicos has also given an offer to join his industry or his innovative centers for developing devices and other sensors for various use of vital parameter measurement. So I assure him that we will definitely think of that and we will work on that. I am also very much thankful to Dr. Yogendra Malik, member NMSC, who has given us guidance how to proceed further. This is very important, even after talks, how to proceed further, how to have more collaboration, in what direction we should move. I am really very thankful to Dr. Yogendra Malik for this detailed discussion, and we will definitely be in touch with you. I am also would like to congratulate Dr. and Professor Lalit Awasthi ji. I know him for the last many years, and it is really, I am fortunate that he is being awarded during this particular session. With these words, I thank all of you for participating, and we have very much covered the theme number 2. That is the theme is the digital health technology vision 2020, how to amplify digital intervention in post COVID-19. So all wearable sensors and optical sensors will definitely help digital technology in post COVID-19 era. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, distinguished guests and esteemed panelists and participants. We will now be ending the session. Thank you.
Thank you.